All right, so today we're diving into something you might not expect, the connection between stress and diabetes.
Yeah.
We've got this really interesting informal piece,
Right.
and it takes a look at something we don't usually think about with diabetes,
Right.
our mental well-being.
Hmm.
It's a pretty fresh perspective.
Yeah. We usually think of diabetes as, diet and lifestyle,
Yeah.
genetics, but this deep dive,
Right.
it kind of reminds us that our mental state plays a role too, and
Yeah.
specifically chronic stress,
Yes.
not just your everyday stress.
And that's what I thought was so interesting.
Yeah.
Most people just think, I'm stressed about work or I've got deadlines or
Yeah.
just life.
Uh-huh.
But this piece really highlights that it's the ongoing relentless stress.
Yeah.
That's the real problem here.
Exactly.
So think about it. How much chronic stress
Mhm.
are you dealing with in your life right now?
Good question.
It's probably more than you realized.
Probably. It's like your body's alarm bells are constantly going off.
Right.
And that constant state of alert
Uh-huh.
can trigger a whole cascade of hormones.
Mm.
And that can lead to some pretty big changes in how your body works.
So let's break down this hormone cascade a little bit.
Okay.
The source talks about cortisol and adrenaline.
Right.
Can you explain what's going on there and how it all ties back to diabetes?
Sure. So think about it this way. When you're stressed,
Okay.
your body releases these hormones,
Uh-huh.
primarily cortisol, to help you deal with it.
Okay.
Cortisol's job is to increase your blood sugar
Okay.
and give you that energy to face whatever's stressing you out.
Right.
So, imagine back in the day, that stressor might have been a saber-toothed tiger.
Okay. I'm picturing the tiger now.
Yeah, so you need that quick burst of energy
Yeah.
to either fight or run away.
Makes sense. So what's the problem?
Well,
We need sugar for energy anyway, right?
we do, but here's the thing.
Okay.
In modern life, we're not usually running from tigers. Right. Our stressors are more constant, work deadlines, money worries,
Yeah, right.
relationship problems, and they just keep that cortisol flowing.
Hmm.
So over time, this constant cortisol
Yeah.
can lead to what we call insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah,
But can you remind me how that works?
of course. So insulin is like a key
Okay.
that unlocks your cells and lets the sugar in
Okay.
to be used for energy.
Right.
But when you have insulin resistance,
Yeah.
those cells become less responsive to insulin.
Mm-hmm.
So the key doesn't work as well.
So the sugar can't get in.
Exactly. And the sugar builds up in your bloodstream.
Right.
And that sets the stage for prediabetes and eventually type 2 diabetes.
So it's like cortisol's constantly saying, hey, danger's coming.
Yeah.
Stock up on sugar, even though the danger is just like a pile of emails.
That's a great way to put it.
And then your body just gets overloaded.
Yeah. And here's where it gets really interesting. Stress doesn't just mess with your hormones.
Mhm.
It affects your behavior too.
Oh, right.
Think about reaching for comfort food or skipping the gym,
Yep.
lying awake at night, worrying.
In there.
All classic stress responses.
Mhm.
And guess what?
Hmm.
They're major risk factors for diabetes.
Oh, wow. So it's like a double whammy.
Exactly.
Stress is setting off this chain reaction,
Uh-huh.
both physically and mentally.
It is.
And the source even mentions emotional eating,
Yeah.
which is something I think we can all relate to.
Right. We're not eating because we're hungry,
Right.
but because we're trying to soothe those emotions.
Yeah, it's almost subconscious.
Exactly. And that's another behavior
Yeah.
that can increase your risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
It really highlights the connection
Right.
between our mental and physical health.
It does.
Yeah.
And then there's Sarah's story, which
Oh.
I found so powerful.
Yeah.
The source talks about this woman who was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And she really believes that stress played a big part in it.
Yeah.
It really brings the whole issue to life.
Sarah's experience, while it's just one story,
Uh-huh.
it actually reflects a growing understanding in medicine.
Mm.
We're finding more and more evidence
Okay.
that chronic stress can actually contribute to type 2 diabetes.
So it's not just genetics or diet anymore.
Right. It's not just those things.
Our mental state is a big factor.
It plays a crucial role.
That's really eye-opening.
Mhm.
So if stress can have this much impact on diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
what else might it be affecting? I
I
have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
You're absolutely right. The source just scratches the surface.
Right.
Think about it. Stress is linked to heart disease,
Oh, yeah.
obesity, mental health issues. The list goes on and on.
It's like this hidden epidemic
It is.
quietly affecting so many parts of our lives.
And that's why it's so important to take stress seriously,
Yeah.
not just as a feeling, but as a real health risk.
So for anyone listening,
Yeah.
if you're dealing with chronic stress,
Right.
this deep dive is a real wake-up call.
Definitely.
It's not just about feeling better right now.
Yeah.
It's about potentially preventing some serious health problems,
Right.
including diabetes down the road.
Exactly. And that leads us to a really interesting question.
Okay.
What if we could actually measure stress objectively? Like we measure blood pressure at the doctor's office.
That's a fascinating question.
Right.
It would definitely make us pay more attention to our stress levels.
It certainly would. It might even lead to a more proactive approach to stress management,
Yeah,
both individually and as a society.
I like that. But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Okay.
let's get back to the impact of stress on diabetes specifically.
Good idea.
We talked about the hormones and the behavioral changes, but I'm curious to explore how stress affects people who are already living with diabetes.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I'd also love to dig into the science a bit more.
Okay.
Is there a way to actually measure the impact of stress on blood sugar?
There is, and that's exactly what we'll dive into next.
Right.
We'll look at the research, the challenges,
Like it.
and the potential for new interventions.
Awesome. I can't wait.
So stay tuned. Welcome back. So before we got into how stress can set the stage for diabetes, we were talking about this idea,
Yeah.
what if we could measure stress, like we measure blood pressure?
It's such a fascinating thought, but before we get too carried away,
Okay.
let's get back to the science.
Sure.
You mentioned that there are ways to measure stress's impact on blood sugar.
Yeah.
What's the research showing?
Well, studies have shown that when people with diabetes experience stress, their blood sugar levels tend to go up.
Okay.
And this is partly because of those hormones we talked about.
Right, cortisol and adrenaline.
Exactly. They signal the liver to release more glucose into the bloodstream.
So it's like their body is getting ready for some big energy demand.
Yeah.
Even if there isn't one.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like preparing for an emergency that's not actually happening.
So for someone who's managing diabetes,
Yeah.
stress is like throwing a wrench into the works.
It is.
They're already trying to keep their blood sugar balanced,
Right.
and then stress comes along and pushes it in the wrong direction.
Exactly. It's like trying to balance on a tightrope
Oh, I like that.
and someone's shaking it.
And it's not just the immediate spike in blood sugar that's worrying.
No, you're right.
Chronic stress can make it harder to manage diabetes in the long run, too.
It can. How so?
Well, remember insulin resistance.
Yeah.
Chronic stress can actually make that worse, making it harder for your body to use insulin effectively.
Okay.
So people with diabetes might need to adjust their medication
Right.
or make changes to their diet and exercise more often.
Just to keep their blood sugar under control.
Exactly.
That sounds incredibly frustrating.
It can be.
It's like stress is making an already tough situation even more complicated. Absolutely. And that's why it's so important for people with diabetes to have a good stress management plan.
Okay, so stress management is key,
It is.
but that's easier said than done right.
It can be?
The source mentions some general tips,
Yeah.
but what actually works best for someone dealing with both stress and diabetes?
That's a great question. And that's where things get really individual.
Okay.
While the basics like exercise, sleep, and healthy eating are important for everyone, people with diabetes need to be extra careful
Okay.
about how these things affect their blood sugar.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Take exercise.
Okay.
For most people, exercise helps lower stress
Right.
and improves insulin sensitivity, which is good.
Makes sense.
But for someone with diabetes, strenuous exercise can actually make their blood sugar go up temporarily.
Oh, wow.
So they might need to adjust their insulin or have a snack before working out.
So it's all about knowing how your body reacts
Yeah,
and making adjustments as needed.
exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. And it's about finding ways to manage stress that fit into your life and don't add more stress.
Exactly. Things like mindfulness meditation,
Okay.
deep breathing exercises,
yeah.
or just spending time in nature.
I like that.
Those can be really helpful
Yeah.
without requiring you to change your whole routine,
The source also talks about social support.
right?
I imagine having a good network of friends and family can really help with managing stress,
It can.
especially when you're dealing with a chronic condition like diabetes.
You're absolutely right. Having people you can lean on
Yeah.
and feeling understood can make a world of difference.
It makes sense.
And the research supports it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, studies show that people with strong social connections
Yeah.
tend to have better blood sugar control
Okay.
and are less likely to have complications from diabetes.
That's great to hear. But what about those times when, even with all our best efforts,
Yeah.
stress just feels overwhelming?
It happens.
The source mentions getting professional help.
Right.
But how can therapy specifically benefit someone with diabetes?
Therapy can be really valuable for people with diabetes and not just for managing stress.
Right.
A therapist can help you develop coping skills
Uh-huh.
for the emotional challenges of living with a chronic illness.
Okay.
They can help you work through feelings of frustration or anxiety,
Yeah.
and they can teach you how to better communicate with your loved ones.
About your needs.
Exactly. It's like having a coach in your corner
I like that analogy.
or someone who understands your specific challenges
Right.
and can help you navigate them.
And for some people, therapy can be a safe space
Yeah.
to deal with difficult emotions
There's
that might otherwise lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms.
exactly, like overeating or isolating yourself.
Right. Which can make blood sugar control even harder.
Exactly.
So getting therapy isn't just about feeling better emotionally.
No.
It's about supporting your physical health, too.
It's about taking a holistic approach to your well-being.
I like that. And for some people,
Yeah,
medication might be part of the picture as well.
it might.
Antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds,
Right,
when prescribed by a doctor, of course,
of course.
can help manage those underlying emotional challenges
Yeah.
that contribute to stress.
Mm-hmm.
And that can make it easier to use those healthy coping skills we talked about.
Exactly.
It sounds like there's a whole range of resources available,
There is.
but knowing where to start can be a bit overwhelming.
It can be.
Where would you suggest people begin?
I always recommend talking to your doctor.
Okay.
They can help you figure out what you need,
Uh-huh.
recommend resources,
Right.
and help you create a personalized plan for managing stress.
That's a great starting point. So we've covered the impact of stress on diabetes,
Yeah.
the importance of stress management, and the resources that are out there.
Right.
But I'm wondering, is there anything new on the horizon
Mm.
in terms of research or treatment?
Well,
The source talked about measuring stress like blood pressure.
yeah.
But is that even possible?
That's where things get really exciting.
Okay.
While we don't have a simple stress meter yet,
Right.
researchers are looking at some really cool ways to objectively measure stress.
Okay. What are they doing?
There's growing interest in using wearable technology like smartwatches to track things like heart rate variability,
Okay.
skin temperature,
Wow.
even sweat levels.
So you could have a smartwatch that
Yeah.
tells you, hey, your stress is getting high.
Exactly.
Take a deep breath or go for a walk.
Exactly. And some researchers are even working on algorithms
Mhm.
that can analyze your voice
Well,
or even your facial expressions to detect stress.
That's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It is pretty amazing.
But on a more serious note,
Yeah.
what are the implications of being able to measure stress objectively?
Well,
Would it really change how we approach healthcare?
it has the potential to revolutionize healthcare. Imagine a future where your doctor can keep an eye on your stress levels remotely,
Right.
identify patterns,
Uh-huh.
and intervene before stress causes serious problems.
That would be amazing.
We could shift from reactive care to proactive prevention.
That would be a game changer, not just for diabetes,
Yeah.
but for overall health.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that also bring up some ethical concerns?
You're right. Access to this kind of data raises questions about privacy, potential misuse,
Right.
and even the possibility of making people more anxious about their health.
It's like with any new tool,
Yeah.
there's potential for good and
It's a
bad.
double-edged sword.
But it's exciting to think about the possibilities,
It is.
especially for people living with diabetes.
Right. And while we're waiting for these futuristic gadgets to become reality, there's still a lot we can do right now to manage stress
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
protect our health.
So we've gone from the science of stress
Yeah.
to personalized management strategies
Yeah.
and even a glimpse into the future of healthcare.
It's been a journey.
It has, but there's one thing we haven't really talked about.
Okay.
The source suggested that stress isn't just a personal problem,
Right.
it's a societal one too.
It is.
What did you mean by that?
It's about realizing that our environment, the systems we live in,
Yeah.
can either make stress worse or make it better. Think about things like long working hours,
Oh, yeah.
financial pressures,
Uh-huh.
social isolation,
Right.
the constant flood of news and information.
I feel stressed just thinking about it.
Right, these are all parts of modern life
Yeah.
that contribute to chronic stress.
It's like we're almost set up to be stressed.
In a way, yeah.
It's built into the way we live.
It is. And if we accept that chronic stress is a disease driver, as the source suggests,
Right.
then we need to look beyond just individual coping mechanisms.
I see what you're saying.
We need to think about how we can create a society that's less stressful.
Okay, but where do we even begin? The source doesn't really offer any solutions, does it?
It doesn't, but it does start a really important conversation.
Okay.
What if we acknowledge the impact of stress on society?
Hmm.
What if we measured it, tracked it, studied it,
Yeah.
like we do with other public health problems?
That goes back to your earlier point
Yeah.
about measuring stress.
Yeah.
Like we measure blood pressure.
Exactly.
If we could actually quantify it, would that make a difference?
Imagine workplaces that prioritize employee well-being,
Okay.
not just productivity.
I like that.
Imagine schools that teach stress management skills alongside academics.
Right.
Imagine healthcare systems that address stress as a root cause of illness,
Okay.
not just a symptom.
So it's about changing our mindset
It is.
from just pushing through stress to preventing it and supporting each other.
Exactly.
But that would require a massive shift, wouldn't it?
It would, and it wouldn't happen overnight.
Right.
But the first step is recognizing the problem.
That's true. This whole conversation has really made me think about my own life, my own choices.
Right.
What can I do even in my own little world
Good
to
question.
create less stress?
It's empowering to realize that we're not just helpless victims of stress.
Yeah.
We can make choices that support our well-being,
Right.
and we can advocate for change in our communities.
So what are some practical things our listeners can do starting today?
A great place to start is setting boundaries.
Okay.
Learn to say no to things that drain your energy.
That's hard sometimes.
It can be, but it's important.
Okay.
Disconnect from technology regularly.
Good advice.
And make time for things that nourish your soul.
Okay.
Spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, pursuing hobbies.
It's about taking control of our time and energy,
Exactly.
not letting the craziness of modern life run us ragged.
That's it. And it's also about being mindful of the messages we send to others.
What do you mean?
Are we glorifying being busy and overworked?
Mm.
Are we setting unrealistic expectations for ourselves and everyone around us?
It's like stress can be contagious.
Exactly. If everyone around you is stressed out,
Yeah,
it's hard to stay calm yourself.
that's true. So setting a good example is important.
It is taking breaks, prioritizing self-care,
Yeah.
setting boundaries.
Right.
These aren't signs of weakness.
No.
They're signs of strength and wisdom.
And if we can create a culture that values those things,
Yeah.
maybe we can start to turn things around.
I believe we can. And it starts with each of us making conscious choices, both in our own lives and in how we interact with the world.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening.
Good. I'm
And
glad.
it's given me a whole new way of looking at stress.
That's great to hear.
Not just as something to put up with,
Right?
but as something we can actually influence,
You can.
both individually and as a society.
Exactly. And that's the power of knowledge.
Yeah.
It helps us make better choices and create positive change.
So as we wrap things up,
Okay.
what's the one key message you hope our listeners take away from this?
Stress is a powerful force, but it doesn't have to rule our lives.
Okay.
By understanding how it works,
Wow.
developing healthy ways to cope,
Yeah.
and working towards a less stressful world,
Right.
we can take back our well-being and build a healthier future.
Well said. This deep dive has given us all a lot to think about,
It has.
a lot to explore further.
Definitely.
And as always, it's just the beginning of the conversation.
That's right.
Thanks for listening. We've really covered a lot in this deep dive into stress and diabetes,
We have.
the science, the personal stories, the ways to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the last part,
Yeah.
you brought up something really interesting.
Okay.
This idea that stress isn't just a personal problem.
Right.
It's a societal one, too.
It is.
What did you mean by that?
It's about recognizing that our environment,
Yeah.
the systems we live in,
Uh-huh.
they can either make stress worse or make it better.
Mm.
Think about things like long work hours.
Yeah, those are definitely stressful.
Financial pressures,
Right.
social isolation. Yeah.
The constant flood of news and information.
I know, it's hard to escape.
These are all part of modern life.
Right, and they all contribute to chronic stress.
Exactly.
So it's like we're almost designed to be stressed.
In a way, yes,
It's built into how we live.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if we accept that chronic stress is a disease driver,
Huh.
as the source suggests,
Right.
then we need to think bigger.
Okay.
We need to look beyond individual coping mechanisms
That's what you're saying.
and consider how we can create a society
Yeah.
that's less stressful, more supportive, more conducive to well-being.
That sounds great in theory.
It does.
But where do we even start?
Right.
The source doesn't really give us any solutions, does it?
It doesn't, but it does spark a really important conversation.
Okay, I'm listening.
What if we actually acknowledged the impact of stress on society?
Okay.
What if we measured it, tracked it, studied it, like we do with other public health issues?
That brings us back to your point
about measuring stress like we measure blood pressure.
Exactly.
If we actually put a number on it, would that change things?
Imagine workplaces that prioritize employee well-being, not just productivity.
I like that.
Imagine schools that teach stress management skills alongside academics.
That would be amazing.
Imagine healthcare systems that treat stress as a root cause of illness, not just a symptom.
So it's about a fundamental shift in our thinking.
It is.
From just powering through stress to preventing it and supporting each other.
Exactly.
But that would take a huge effort, wouldn't it?
It would. It wouldn't happen overnight.
Right.
But the first step is simply recognizing the problem.
This whole conversation has really gotten me thinking about my own life, my own choices.
Yeah.
What can I do even in my own little world to create less stress?
That's a great question. And it's empowering to realize that we're not just passive victims of stress.
Right. We have some control.
We do. We can make choices that support our well-being.
Okay.
And we can speak up for change in our communities.
So what are some practical things our listeners can do starting today?
Setting boundaries is a great place to start.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Learn to say no to things that drain you.
Yeah, that's hard.
It can be, but it's so important.
Okay, what else?
Disconnect from technology regularly.
I definitely need to do that more often.
Make time for things that nourish your soul.
Like what?
Spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones.
Yeah.
Pursuing hobbies, things you enjoy.
That's about taking charge of our time and energy.
Exactly.
Not letting ourselves get swept up in the busyness of everything.
That's it. And it's also about being mindful of the messages we're sending to others.
What do you mean by that?
Are we glorifying being busy all the time?
Good point.
Are we setting these unrealistic expectations for ourselves and everyone around us?
It's true. Sometimes it feels like stress is contagious.
It can be. If everyone around you is stressed out.
Right. It's hard to stay calm yourself.
So we need to set a good example.
We do. Taking breaks, prioritizing self-care, setting boundaries.
Yeah.
These aren't signs of weakness.
Yeah, they're the opposite.
Exactly. They're signs of strength and wisdom.
And if we can create a culture where those values are celebrated, maybe we can start to turn things around.
I believe we can.
Yeah.
And it starts with each of us making conscious choices in our own lives and in how we interact with the world around us.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening.
I'm glad you found it helpful.
It's given me a whole new perspective on stress.
That's great to hear.
Not just as something to endure, but as something we can actually influence, both personally and collectively.
And that's the power of knowledge, isn't it?
It is.
It empowers us to make better choices and create positive change.
So to wrap things up,
okay,
what's the one key message you hope listeners take away from this?
Stress is a powerful force.
It really is.
But it doesn't have to control our lives.
By understanding its impact, developing healthy coping mechanisms, and advocating for a less stressful world, we can reclaim our well-being and build a healthier future for everyone.
That's a great message to end on. This deep dive has given us all a lot to think about.
It has.
A lot to explore further. As always, it's just the beginning of the conversation.
It is. Keep the conversation going.
Thanks for listening.